أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to another session in our course from Ali alayhi salam to Al-Mahdi alayhi salam, and we're very close to the Wilad of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, very close to the end of the course. And today we have a very important discussion where we're going to be again putting a lot of the theory that we've been discussing so far and seeing how we can put all of this into practice. So again, from the previous sessions, we've established that there is an imam who is living today and who is amongst us. We just cannot recognize him. And we came to the conclusion that there was a wisdom for him to go into Ghaiba, and that wisdom was that the people were not ready to take him as their leader, accept his guidance, and so he had to go waiting for us to be ready. So what we want to discuss today is to understand, okay, when Imam is waiting for us, that means we have a duty towards him. We have a duty to perform so that we can show the Imam that we are ready for him to come back. And for this very interesting and important discussion, we have with us Shaykh Kazim. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykhana.
Alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
Thank you very much for coming once again to the course. So inshallah, we'll be discussing this concept of intidhar and how we can wait for the Imam. So just to get the discussion starting, so what is this concept of intidhar, and what does it mean that we are waiting for the Imam? Because so far we've been saying that the Imam is actually waiting for us to be ready.
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi tahirin. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So, as you mentioned, we have reached a very important stage of a discussion in this course, and in a way I can say that we waited for this section because this is the most practical and the things that would follow. Because all that built up and understanding Imama in an accurate manner was there, so that eventually I find out what I need to do.
Yeah, there's no point knowing all of these things if there's no practical implication.
So exactly, as the Ahlul Bayt have emphasized, that all the knowledge that we have and the ma'rifah, which is so important to have, is so that it leads me to the right amal, the right action. And if I stop here and I say that, okay, now I know who the Imam is, I know his sifat, his qualities, what it means to be an Imam, it would be an incomplete discussion. So this is a very important discussion, and it's very relevant also to all of us as Muslims, as the followers of the school of Ahlul Bayt, to know what my duty is in the period of Ghaiba, and especially in the context of Imama, and what's my duty towards the Imam, and how am I supposed to approach this period of ghaiba. And as you brought up this idea which has come in our narrations, this idea of intidhar.
Intidhar, which means to be awaiting.
To awaiting, intidharul faraj, and there are so many different narrations, and some of them we will discuss here. So what I'll do in the beginning, very briefly, to put things in perspective, is that because the course is about Imama, and there's a lot of detail that was mentioned, and it was emphasized that they have a very special role, and we have certain duties towards the Imam. So that's what was being discussed so far. But I want to say this before I start my discussion about our duties during Ghaiba, that even this idea of Imama, we need to look at it in the bigger picture of Islam and Deen. So it shouldn't be disconnected from this idea of Deen, because we're looking at Imama as the pillar of Deen and Islam. So, okay. So when I put Imama in that position that it has in Deen, it's not only going to define my duty with respect to Imama in Ghaiba, but in fact that will also tell me that what's generally my duty, what am I supposed to do as a Muslim. So it's one and the same thing. So I'll just mention this point here, that the goal for which Islam was sent was Tawheed. And that's the fundamental pillar of Islam that we have.
Our progress towards Allah and reaching the perfection is basically Tawheed in itself.
So Tawheed, but starting from a very mental idea of Tawheed, understanding that there's one God, to actualizing Tawheed in our lives.
Yeah.
And then we briefly mentioned this idea before it came, that when we say actualizing Tawheed and getting closer to Allah, we also mean that this needs to happen at a mass global scale. So it's not about a few individuals reaching perfection, getting closer to Allah, actualizing that Tawheed and reaching those high spiritual stations. That's not what we are talking. We're talking about a very universal guidance that there. So if I want to place imama accurately in this puzzle of Islam, whereby I know the entire Islam is there to take me closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to take the society to its ultimate perfection, then imama is fundamental in this process. Why? Because that's the path. That's the arrangement Allah has made to lead the society and also individuals to that destination. So
that's a very important point you mentioned, because a lot of times the impression comes that because we're speaking so much about imamat, that actually we're making it sound like this is the goal of our journey. Whereas what you said is that the goal is tawheed, but the path is this path of wilaya. It's very important. Now, I guess the reason why we're speaking so much about it is because the difference of opinions actually stems from here, right? Yeah. That's why there's so much focus on it. But in reality, the goal is that tawheed, and the way to get to that true tawheed is the way of wilaya.
Exactly. So, for example, we have, I'm just quoting one of the sentences that we have. It repeats a lot in different du'as, in different narrations. So, example, whilst referring to the Ahlul Bayt, we say, فَكَانُوا هُمُ السَّبِيلَ إِلَيْكَ. So basically, they are the path towards you. وَالْمَسْلَكُ إِلَىٰ رِضْوَانِكَ. So basically, our aim in this world is to acquire that Allah's pleasure, that Ridwan that we want to achieve. The Quran mentions, وَرِضْوَانٌ مِنَ اللَّهِ أَكْبَرُ. That's the highest blessing even in paradise. So I want to reach that Ridwan. This is the path. The Ahlul Bayt are the path. Or let me give you a very example that relates to these days that we are passing through, the month of Sha'ban. The blessed month of Sha'ban is the month of Ibadah. One of the mustahab things that's recommended to be recited every day, in every single day of Sha'ban, is this very beautiful salawat called Salawat Sha'baniyah. So that shows the position of the Ahlul Bayt in the scheme of things. So focusing on Ahlul Bayt doesn't mean that now we are somehow putting Allah outside the picture. No, in fact, through them we'll realize true Tawheed. So what do we say? We say, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, شجرة النبوة وموضع الرسالة ومختلف الملائكة ومعدن العلم وأهل بيت الوحي. So this is their description. Okay. That who they are, what their station is. Okay. Then the next thing starts, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa alimat al-fulkil jariya fil lujajil ghamira ya'manu man rakibaha wa yagraku man taraka. So this is the idea that, look, this world and dunya is like a stormy sea. It's raging waves from all the sides. You need a safe place. Al-fulkil jariya fil lujajil ghamira. So it's, and we have this idea that the Ahlul Bayt are safinatun nijat. So in narrations like this. So they are the path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Tawheed is the goal. Imama and Wilaya is the path. So therefore, both are very important and both have their own role and function. You can't interchange them. So if someone comes and says that, oh, you're being too imam-centric, and he wants to use this to somehow say that we shouldn't have such a relationship with the imam and we should be God-centric, I think this is a logical fallacy here. It's like trying to pit two things against each other, which in reality were complementing each other, which
they were in line with each other.
In line with each other. One is the path, one is the destination. You never put path against the destination. They're not enemies of each other. Yeah. I mean, if you have a path that leads to your destination, the path is important because, not because the path itself has some intrinsic value. No, the path is important, leading you to destination. There's no contradiction. So this false dichotomy between that Imam centricity or God centricity is an unnecessary division that's being made, and somehow this idea comes that, oh, I have to choose between one of these two.
Yeah.
So either you say, if I'm focusing on my relationship with the Imam, then I'm not being God centric. No, in fact, more I focus on the Imam and my relationship with the Imam, and we'll talk about it, that if I want to prepare for his coming, the coming of Imam al-Mahdi, then what that relationship should be. And if I build that relationship correctly, I'll be the top muwahid. And that's God's linked it. And the reason is clear. So if I ask this question, even to my audience, that if you look at the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Imams, okay, who are the closest companions? So we know them by the names. Okay, so for example, Rasulullah even read that narration which spoke about the Hawariyun of each of the Imams. So name of Salman, Abu Dhar, Miqdad. What would you say about their level of Tawheed? Had they not reached high spiritual perfections? If you go and look at their lives, their in authentic history, in the narrations that speak about Salmanu minna ahl al-bayt, okay, he's so close to us. Then descriptions about their spiritual station. So this tells us, brings us this idea that closer a person is to the Imam, that automatically means he is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Now, I think when we talk about closeness to the Imam, sometimes it does happen, we find in our communities, in the society at large, that there are some people who take this in the wrong way. So they have this, they sort of take it to the extreme, and rather than using the Imams as a path, they actually make them the goal. And therefore, for example, you find that there in some cultures, in some societies, Salah is compromised for the sake of, for example, with claims that, okay, we are, for example, I don't know, doing rituals that are for the Ahlul Bayt. So when Imam centricity becomes, when that, I wouldn't call Imam centricity then, because they're not following the Imam.
Yeah.
So if that claim of following the Imam goes against the purpose of Tawheed, then this is where the problem is. But then we would say that this is not even Imam centricity.
Exactly.
This has gone away from the path of the Imam, because the Imams are calling towards Allah.
So if I would say this in another words, I would say that there's two meanings of Imam centricity, one right meaning, one wrong meaning. And also there are two meanings to God centricity, one right meaning and one wrong meaning. And the wrong meaning of Imam centricity is what you just described, that leaving Salat, for example, the things that the Gulat used to do, just go after haram and don't follow the Imams, and we'll come to that. Why am I saying it's the wrong meaning of Imam centricity? Because in cases like this, where people are not obeying the Imam, Imams have clearly said that such a person is outside our wilaya. I mean, so there's no, so it's the wrong meaning of.
We even have a hadith that talk about who the true Shia is, and you see that the characteristics are so much is to do with spirituality, is to do with closeness to Allah, it's to do with God.
Exactly. But I would also like to say, so that's one extreme, that's the wrong meaning of Imam centricity. But we should be careful to not go on the other extreme, and that brings us to the wrong meaning of God centricity, whereby you disregard the Imams, bring them lower to a position than what they actually have, not benefit from their guidance and the position that they have, and with doing that, say that, okay, now I'm going to be God-centric, I'm going to be spiritual.
Whereas it's God himself who is telling us to go through them. So that's by claiming God centricity, we are letting go of one of the important and fundamental teachings that Allah wants us to hold tight onto.
And fundamental in the sense that, I'm going to come to that, there's no path without that. It's an exclusive path to God through the Imam. So it's not even something which is, you can say that, oh, there's a path to God that works without the Imam. Of course, we'll discuss what it means and how should I establish my relationship with the Imam to reach that goal. But this is the only way. And that's why Imamat is the central pillar. So the narrations of Da'aimul Islam, the foundational pillars of Islam. So mentions Salat, Zakat, and then they mentions Wilaya, and says, وَمَا نُودِيَ بِشَيْءٍ مِثْلَ مَا نُودِيَ لِلْوِلَايَةِ. I mean, we haven't been invited to anything more than that we have been invited to Wilaya. Because without that, the destination would not be reached. So I think this is important, that imama has its special place in scheme of things. So the conclusion would say that the right meaning of imam centricity and the right meaning of God centricity, they coincide and they are in line with each other. So this wilaya is the path. So this should put things in perspective, that we're not talking about two different things. My duty to imam as opposed to my duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's not the case. Yeah. So in fact, these are two sides of one coin. If I do my duty to the imam correctly, if I do intidharul faraj correctly, that itself is the ibadah. So you have this narration, so I'll bring it. So I'll connect it from here to the idea of intidharul faraj. So we have narration says, Afdalul ibadah intizarul faraj. So this clearly shows that intizarul faraj, which is related to the imam and doing our duties to the imam, is the highest of worship.
Can we just define what it means, intizarul faraj?
Yeah. So the literal translation is waiting for. Okay. So this riwayah has a general meaning, and it has a specific meaning specific to Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam. Okay. You can even, so some of the scholars have said that this narration, intidharul faraj, afdalul ibadah, they say it has a general meaning, that when you are in a difficulty, any difficulty, striving and waiting for that difficulty to get solved is a ibadah. So we shouldn't submit to difficulties. We should be striving and hoping that one day Allah will send faraj. Faraj means an opening. A relief opening whereby the difficulty will go away. Okay. But in the context of Imam al-Mahdi, his dhuhur is the biggest faraj. Okay, so I'll read one or two narrations, so it would be interesting to even go through some of these. So for example, Man mata minkum wa huwa muntadhirun li hada al-amr. Okay, so in narrations, when this idea of al-amr, amruna, comes, scholars have explained that it usually refers to the amr of wilaya. So the wilaya of the Ahlul Bayt. So this narration is from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. He says that man mata minkum wa huwa muntadhirun li hadha al-amr kana kaman huwa ma'al ka'iman fi fustasihi. So if someone is waiting for the faraj with respect to wilaya, so this is probably the most important faraj for the whole humanity. It's the biggest relief and the biggest opening that Allah is going to put for the whole humanity. So the narration which I mentioned before, afdalu a'amali ummati intidharul faraj. Okay, so the best of the actions of my ummah is from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is to wait for the dhuhur of the imam of the time. So now we come to this idea that this waiting needs to be active, in the sense that we are preparing for his return. Why do we say that? Because when we look at the reasons that caused the ghaibah, and we discussed it in detail, the reasons went back to the duty that the ummah was supposed to do. So the failure of the ummah to perform that duty led to the ghaibah of the imam, and there's no other choice. There's no other option left for the imam. Okay. Now to undo that, the logical way to get the imam back and have him with us so he can lead us and take us to that ideal society perfection is to undo these reasons. So now you can't say that the ummah is not going to do anything and is just going to passively wait. Okay, it's never going to lead to that result, which is his dhuhur. So
because
they say
that's sort of reinforcing the reason why he shouldn't be there.
Exactly. So that's one reason that logically and intellectually doesn't make sense. Why? Because the result we are looking is the dhuhur. It has certain causes, certain reasons that led to his absence. So we need to undo that. All of that is to do with us. And I'm saying that I'm not going to do anything. So the question, if I'm not going to do anything, it was related to me, how is it going to come back? You say, no, I'm just going to wait. Maybe there's a period assigned by Allah, natural thing, and then he'll come. If he comes, same thing will happen. Yakhaful qatl. Okay, so he won't
be accepted by
there'll
the
be
masses.
Oppressors. I'm sure that we should at least be aware that even today there are places, institutes that do research on Imam al-Mahdi. They want to know who is he as a belief of the Shia. So who knows, there might be groups, people who would be waiting to see any signs of him, and then they would be after his life. It's not a far-fetched thing to have. That's one reason. The other reason that scholars have explained that the intidhar that we do cannot be passive. It cannot mean just waiting. Waiting in that sense of not doing anything. So they say it's from the same narration. This narration says, أَفْضَلُ أَعْمَالِ أُمَّتِ إِنْتِظَارُ الْفَرَجِ. Okay. Now look at all the amal. Salat, Sawm, Hajj, Zakat, Jihad. So these are those prime actions of the Ummah of Rasulullah, right? This narration is saying Intidharul Faraj is better than all of this. Okay, so can we accept the idea that doing nothing, not preparing for his return, is better than all of these other actions that take so much effort? So it being the best of the actions requires it to be something very active, something more difficult than the other actions that we have in Sharia. So some of the scholars have used this to come to this idea that we need to be actively preparing for him. But actively preparing for him is a very general term, okay, and it doesn't give us any insight into, okay, great, I want to be active and to prepare for the coming of the Imam. Okay, what should I do? Should I, for example, go and learn how to fight because he's going to come, and we have heard these things that we need to prepare, like in the sense that there'll be, for example, there'll be a war, there'll be fighting. Does that what it means? So this will take us back to the idea of what my relationship with the Imam is, what my responsibility with respect to Imam al-Mahdi, my living, my hay, we say Imam Zaman, it's the Imam of my time. He's the one under whose authority I am there. So that's something that's very important to define. So from here on, I think we'll move to the discussion about what that duty is. So from here we'll come to a very, very practical part of our discussion. Inshallah, is something that I'm describing it here, but we really, really pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He gives all of us the tawfiq to actually act upon them, because these are practical things. Saying them might be easy and discussing them, but the important part is that can we put these in practice. So just to make things a bit clear and systematic, I would say that in the ghaibah, with respect to the Imam and Imamat, and it's actually another way of saying that my duty to God in the ghaibah, I'll divide it into my individual duty and my social duty, or I'll say my duty as an individual and our collective duty as the Shia. So here I'm talking about the Shia, those who believe in Imam al-Mahdi and this idea of imamat based on the narrations and the different proofs that we have.
Ideally, it's the duty of all the Muslims, but unfortunately, because it is only the Shia who believe it in this way, based on what the Prophet and the Imams have said, it becomes a duty of the Shias. But otherwise, it's a duty that the whole Ummah has.
Yeah, because we would say that all these duties that we have with respect to the divine guides are mentioned in the Quran. And we refer to different verses in the Holy Quran, and I'll refer again today that these duties are mentioned by the Quran. So ideally, all the Muslims have this duty on them. But because they haven't recognized the Imams as these specific individuals, for whatever reason, are they justified in that, or no, they'll be excused for that? That's a separate discussion related to divine guidance. But many of them, most of the non-Shia Muslims, would not be able to perform these duties because of the state they are in right now.
In terms of their ideology, they're not even paying attention to these duties in this sense.
In this sense. Although I would say this here, and it will come in a discussion, that some of the duties they can also accept and understand despite not being Shia. And we as Shias also have certain duties towards them to bring them in this whole idea of preparing for the Savior. Because even though they don't accept Imam al-Mahdi as that living Hay Imam with the details that we mentioned, but they have idea of a Savior. They have this idea of al-Mahdi. They have descriptions of al-Mahdi. They have narrations from Rasulullah that talk about how the end times and the times near the Zuhur are going to look like. So even in their own context and with their knowledge that they have about their own sect and madhab, we can even invite them. But whatever we say, eventually this duty of preparing for the Zuhur and preparing in the Ghaiba falls on the Shia as a whole, as a community, as a society that's united by this powerful thing called the love of the Ahlul Bayt and this central position that Imam holds. So individual duties and social duties. Now, individual duties, I'm going to, I'm dividing it, I'm doing it like this is 2 types and this is 3 types. I mean, the idea is to just make it a bit systematic. It's easy to remember. And it also gives us some sequence to this duty. So when I'll describe these duties, both individual and social, there'll be a sequence. So we can say that, okay, this is my first duty. If I don't perform this first duty, I'll be struggling in my second duty. If I don't do my second duty, I'll be struggling in my third duty. And again, all of this is from the verses of the Quran and also from the narrations that we have. So let's for now focus on that individual part. Very briefly, we'll talk, and then a good amount of discussion we will have to do on the social part, because that's where the Ghaiba will end, because the Ghaiba happened because of social reasons. So we spoke about that. Otherwise, there were individuals ready to do all the duties with respect to the Imam. This is important, that in the time of the Imams, there were individuals who were doing all their individual duties with respect to the Imam. And yet, Imam had to go in the Ghaiba. Why? Because it's mainly tied to a set of social reasons. So if you want to undo this and bring the Imam back, we'll have to focus on the social reasons as well. And that sometimes I feel is missing in our discussions. That individual part of relationship with the Imam is extremely important. I don't deny that. And that's the core. But even amongst ourselves, like when we talk about Imam al-Mahdi, how many times do we talk about looking at from a social scale, from a global scale, doing things to prepare his coming? So I think that's a discussion that we need to activate a bit more. But the foundation of that is definitely my individual relationship with the Imam. And especially when it comes to Imam al-Mahdi, all these narrations that we have and his global mission, and he wants to fill the earth with justice, automatically things become of a social nature, and not even a social nature where you're talking about a community or even a society. You like literally go to the global scale, and that's the scale you'll have to talk, because that's what his ultimate mission is. So we should and we will come to that part. But before that, we speak about the individual duty that we have towards the Imam and the individual relationship. So what I'll do, just to make a discussion complete, because what I'm trying to do here is that I'm trying to I won't be able to go into details of every single thing, but at least I want to give a complete framework that we know that, okay, my relationship with the Imam, how does it work? So there are 2 aspects to it, my relationship with the Imam. One, I'm going to call it the Zahiri aspect, which means in the apparent sense, in the life of this world that I have, what is my duty towards the Imam? What should I be doing? Okay. That's one aspect, and this I'll discuss in more detail, because that's the practical part, right? And that's what we want to know more. But there's a batini aspect to the wilayat of the Ahlul Bayt, which directly relates to their takwini position. Okay, so I as an individual, from a batini perspective, and batini I mean from the perspective of my own soul, my own salvation, in the inner world, in what happens to me after death, my salvation, and the metaphysical world and the metaphysical realities, I have a certain connection in terms of my spirituality with the Imam. And this connection, the source of that is the takwini wilaya that they have. And I just want to say this here, that people shouldn't see this as something far-fetched, that the believers, the mu'mineen, have a connection with the alamul ghaib, the hidden realm. The Holy Quran says is that إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَالُوا رَبُّنَا اللَّهُ ثُمَّ اسْتَقَامُوا تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. The Quran is saying that those people who say our Lord is Allah, and they do istiqama, they are steadfast on the path. Okay, so it's not the regular believers, but these believers who are very firm in their faith and even in their action. Quran says, تَتَنَزَّلُ عَلَيْهِمُ الْمَلَائِكَةُ. Angels descend upon them. Okay, and now this descent of angels is not physical, right? We know angels are metaphysical. So what it means, these believers have a connection with the angels. Okay, so in the same manner, in the same light, I'm giving an example, the believers have a certain metaphysical, spiritual connection with the Ahlul Bayt. Okay. But that's not what I want to go into the detail, although it would be very important to do that. So for example, I'll just give you two titles. For example, you want to see what this relationship means. For example, we have narrations and a whole discussion that as believers, our rizq is channelized through them. They are the wasata, they are the intermediaries of divine grace. So this idea was spoken about. To make it more tangible, we have this idea in our narrations, and I was looking at these narrations, those people who are like interesting in sanad and very sensitive about sanad. So we have multiple sahih narrations about this idea that our actions are presented to the imam of the time. Okay, so this is a metaphysical reality, right? I'm doing my actions, but the connection is so close. He's the imam, even in the takwini sense. So my actions are presented. I would have time, I would go through. So there's this whole, someone has written an article collecting all these narrations, and he brings so many narrations. So we have narrations that tell us sahih, and not one, multiple sahih narrations. What better can you get? You're looking for sahih narrations, multiple sahih narrations that tell us that the a'mal of the Shia are...
So a part of it was discussed by Shaykh Mustafa in the previous session, where we discussed that the Imam of our time being the Khalifa of Allah and being basically one of the main instances of the verse that says that Allah witnesses your actions and the prophets and the believers. Here by believers it refers to the Imam, and therefore the Imam Mahdi is also
exactly. So even basically, these narrations that is going through, they bring this same Sayyarallahu wa Rasuluhu. So this thing that Allah and His Prophet and the believers are watching your actions. So why did I bring this up? Because I don't want to go into the details, and it's good you mentioned that it was discussed to some extent. I'll also mention it here. If someone is really interested in pursuing this, Ayatollah Tahriri, in his book, the commentary on the hadith of Unwan al-Basri, he discusses this in detail. So it's around 20-25 pages of discussion, bringing different verses and narrations that we have. And also he goes in details that in a takwini sense, what exactly is the benefit and the relationship I have. And he says how significant it is in my spiritual progress from that inward perspective. But what we want to focus right now is that the outward duties that I'm supposed to do in my regular day-to-day life is what we need to really focus, because that inward reality is also a result if I'm doing my outward duties properly. So this needs to be understood. So
just to quickly remind the brothers and sisters that Ayatollah Tahriri's sharh of the hadith of Unwan al-Basri has been translated. It is in English and it's available, translated by Shaykh Kazim. And it's available, I think, online.
Yeah, you can buy it online. You can go on these famous online bookstores, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and other places. You search the name. It's called True Servitude and the Reality of Knowledge.
So it's a very important book. The author himself is a very respectable scholar, a teacher of spirituality, and it's something that's worth for the brothers and sisters.
I would highly recommend this book. I got the opportunity to translate it, and it's amazing. It puts everything in its right place, gives you the complete perspective, and it's very, very practical. It tells us that, okay, I want to be spiritual. I want to get closer to Allah, because I think we should... I would even say this, that even this entire course on imama, despite going through a lot of discussions about proving different things, eventually what we want to learn from the Ahlul Bayt is our path to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's where we should eventually focus. Of course, these discussions are important, but they shouldn't stop at just being intellectual discussions. The practical part has to come. So how do I define that duty? I'll keep it very brief because each of these you can expand on each of these a lot. So I'll say, as an individual, I have 3 duties towards the Imam. The first duty is I'll call ma'rifah, recognizing the Imam. Again, I'll use the same hadith, the famous one. Man mata wa lam ya'rif imama zamanihi mata mitatan jahiliya. This means a lot. And there's an emphasis on ma'rifah, that knowing the Imam. I'll explain in a bit that what does it mean to know the Imam. The second duty that we have is, and again I'm using the word duty because that's what we have been told, that it's actually a duty. The second duty is to love the Imam, to have that how should I say it, that unique, personal, emotional relationship with the Imam. Not see Imam as something very far, just an intellectual concept, just a combination of ideas in mind. No, it's something real, something tangible,
which
something
we need to
amazing.
relate to in our day-to-day life.
Yeah, exactly. So that idea of love and that close connection with the Ahlul Bayt. And the third duty that we have is the duty of obedience. And I'll explain the link between these 3. So this will form our individual duties. And when it comes to our social duties, I'll just say that if I want to describe our social duty in one single word, I would say that our social duty with respect to the Imam is nusra, to help him. And we spoke about this idea of Imam not having helpers and that being the reason for his ghaibah. So we'll come back to that idea. Of course, helping the Imam needs to be contextualized in each different context. We need to, so this is a very interesting idea, helping the Imam. But the question is, in my circumstances, in ghaibah, where I live today, my society, my community, my family, how do I help them? My potential as well. My potential, how do I help them? That's important that we go into a bit of detail. Otherwise, this general idea is amazing. You say, there's having this intention and motivation that I want to help the Imam, but we also need to some extent go to the specifics as well.
And I guess one of the prerequisites of being able to help the Imam is to firstly have worked on ourselves. And this is where those 3 duties, individual duties that we have, really come into place, because we cannot help the Imam when we ourselves are not in line with him. We don't even know what he wants from us if we don't have that ma'rifah and so on. So you'll go into that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a certain sequence between these 4 things: ma'rifah, mahabba, ita'a, and the 4th one is nusra. And they're very closely interlinked, and the individual and the social aspect are also closely linked. So in a way, you would say that social duty cannot be performed if I haven't performed my individual duties. Of course, I'm saying that it's the individual duties they precede the social duty, but I'm not saying necessarily in terms of time. So it's not the case that I need to finish my individual duties, like reach age of 40, 50, then I start. No, they go hand in hand, but that relationship
in terms of sequentially, the individual ones come first.
And it's a necessary requisite for helping the Imam. If I'm not obeying the Imam, I wouldn't be able to help him. And that connection, logical connection, is there. So the first duty that we have with respect to the Imam is to have his ma'rifah and know who he is. So when we see ma'rifah, of course there's so much we can talk about it, but I would just focus on this key point that when we say we need to recognize him, we need to recognize him by his role and understand that what is the duty and the role and the position of the Imam, and again, and add to that, what's the role of this whole idea of imama in the bigger picture. And in fact, I would say that this whole course that's being organized and these things are being discussed is an attempt to fulfill this obligation of gaining the ma'rifah of the Imam. But I would say this here, that even this is not enough. I think in the first session when we started, you mentioned that people might think that, respected viewers might think that this is a very long course. But again, come back to this idea that with all these things that have been said and that will be said, yet there's more to know and understand and ponder about imama. And that's what you've been invited, that we need to exactly understand this role, because it has so much relevance to my life and how I act and what I do. So this idea is there. So I would just, I won't go into the details, because this topic itself, you can go into a lot of detail based on different narrations. I'll just say that we all should put more effort as individuals, as families, as communities, to make it a big thing that, look, we want to understand who this Imam is, both individually in terms of his characteristics, in terms of his role, in terms of their teachings. In all different ways, we need to understand this idea of who this Imam is.
So just to say that in this whole course, the reason why this course, although it's been quite long and it's got a lot of information, is still not there, because all we've done in most of the course is to just establish the aspect that these things are in Islam. We didn't really go into the depth of it and understand what it really is. We started doing that in the later sessions. So it's really important that we go into it and understand who our Imam is. And I still remember many years ago, before coming to the Hawza, I remember with a few friends we had gone for ziyarah, and I still remember this very vividly, that we were sitting, I think, in the shrine of Imam Kazim alayhi salam, and we were sitting there, a few of us friends, and all of us had that, surprisingly, we had that same thought coming around the same time. And, we've come to Imam Kazim, but we don't even know who he is, right? What do we know about Imam Kazim? His name, his dad's name, when he's born, even that, if we remember that, right? This is what the madrasa sort of emphasizes. We just know about him in that sense. But like you said, we need to have ma'rifah of the Imam. So we said, let's read a few verses of Ziyarah Jamia and appreciate who this personality is. And by reading a few of those lines and understanding their position in the light of Allah, their role as a guide for us, you come to appreciate that this Imam Kazim is such a great person.
Exactly. And there's so much there that the Imams have said about the reality of Imama. And add to that, for example, the life history of the Imams. Just knowing the history, it's an important thing. These are very special people, the 12 personalities, so we need to know. Again, I'm not going into the details. I just want to mention, for example, we have this, it's a very long, but it's an amazing narration. We have many books. Al-Kafi, Ghaiba of Nu'mani, Uyunul Akhbar, Kamaluddin, Ma'aniul Akhbar, Amali of Shaykh Saduq, Ihtijaj of Tabarsi, and of course later Biharul Anwar. All of these books, they narrate this narration. It's very interesting. I'm not going to read all of it. It's very long. I just want to say that how important this. So this is from Imam al-Ridha. So the narrator says, the narrator is Abdul Aziz ibn Muslim. He says, Kunna fi ayyami Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha bi Mar. We were with Imam al-Ridha in the city of Mar, and فَاجْتَمَعْنَا فِي مَسْجِدِ جَامِعِهَا فِي يَوْمِ الْجُمَعَةِ. I'm not reading the Arabic because it takes time. Saying that we were in the Masjid Jami, the biggest masjid where the Namaz al-Jummah is held. This narrator says that I heard people are talking about Imama. It's a hot topic of debate. Okay, and they're not the Shias who are discussing this, the general Muslims. Different conflicting opinions. We have Imama, we don't have all that. And كثرة الاختلاف الناس فيها. He's saying that people have so many differing opinions. So he says, I came to فدخلت على سيدي ومولاي. I came to my master Imam al-Ridha فأعلمته. I told him what happened. So the narration says فتبسم. He smiled. Imam smiled and said, قال يا عبد العزيز جهل القوم وخدئوا. They have no idea what Imama is. They're ignorant of that. He's smiling and saying that they don't know what Imama is. And then this khutbah starts. So basically, if you want to see a summary of what you have discussed in this entire course, you can find it in this khutbah. And it will be amazing if we get a chance to just read the khutbah and translate. It's very long. So he explains this whole thing, that the wilayah of Rasulullah, and then after that Amirul Mumineen, and then he comes to this place. I'll just read these few words. So he comes to this place. He says that إن الإمامة هي منزلة الأنبياء وإرث الأوصياء إن الإمامة خلافة الله عز وجل خلافة الرسول ومقام أمير المؤمنين وميراث الحسن والحسين عليهما السلام إن الإمامة زمام الدين ونظام المسلمين وصلاح الدنيا عز المؤمنين. So describing, look, Imama is not something simple. It's the Zimamuddin, the protection of deen is with Imama. When Nizamul Muslimin, if you want to unite the Muslims, give them a system, make them a one unit, you need the Imam. Salahud Dunya, even if you want Salahud Dunya,
prosperity in the
dunya,
world,
it's the hands of the Imam. Izzul Mu'minin. If you want the Muslims to have that honor and respect, that izzah, it's from them. Then he says, it's very beautiful. They said, Innal imamata ussul islamin nami wa far'uhu sami bil imami tamamu salati wa zakati wa siyami wal hajji wal jihad wa tawfirul fai'i wa sadaqat wa imda'ul hududi wal ahkam. All these ahkam, establishment of this, who's going to establish prayer? It's the Imam. Through him it's going to happen. And then he even mentions he comes a place where he says that إن الإمام يحلل حلال الله ويحرم حرام الله ويقيم حدود الله ويذب عن دين الله ويدعو إلى سبيل ربه بالحكمة والموعظة الحسنة. All these duties are centered in this person of the Imam, establishing religion. And when you read these, you come to this very clear idea that this social aspect of Imama was very prominent from the very beginning, when this issue of Imama came at the time of Amir al-Mu'minin and even at the time of Imam al-Ridha. It's a topic of hot debate, and there's probably like few pages. It's one of the very beautiful, it's like a khutbah, he's just explaining the Imama. Bottom line is that our ma'rifah of the Imama is not what it is expected of a Shia, and we can definitely put more time into it. I'll just complete that discussion of ma'rifah with mahabba, and because we know a lot about the importance of the love of the Ahlul Bayt and having that connection with the Imam, and especially with Imam al-Mahdi, loving him, caring for him, feeling for him, I would just say this, and we can stop for a break, and that is that ma'rifah leads to mahabba. When you see that they have these perfections, they have this role, this is how much they care for me, this is how much they sacrificed for my guidance, for our guidance, this is how much pains they had to go through for this deen to reach me, okay, automatically this ma'rifah is going to lead me to start actually
appreciating them and loving them, because we
them.
can't love something we don't know
about it.
And the more we know them, the more we start loving them.
And love, if it is the true love, it is automatically, it leads us to obeying them. And because it's not a material love, it's a special love of a spiritual nature, whereby it's a love between a wali and the ummah and the people. So he has that authority, but that's the beauty, right? That authority in a general worldly sense many times comes with fear, and that idea that
of
power and that greatness. So the beauty of Islam and the Ahlul Bayt is that yes, they have that grandeur and that even you say authority and power, but that same authority is combined with so much love.
And so this way the Prophet is rahmatan lil alameen. This way, so Allah has boldened this trait of the Prophet.
Exactly, and this holds true for the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam as well.
Ahsantum. So let's take a quick break and then we can continue the discussion. So brothers and sisters, we'll be back in a few moments, inshallah.
به هوای حرم به امید کرم بر روی لبم عجل فرجم سوی کرب و بلا به دعا و بکا با هر قدمم عجل فرجم عجل فرجم چه خوش آن نفسی که به محرم دل بنشینم و تازه کنم غم دل، بنویسم از آتش هجر حبیبم و قصه غصه و ماتم دل. تو میانه خیل عزایی و من همه جا بروم به بهانه تو، همه جا بروم به بهانه تو، که مگر برسم در خانه تو. از کودکی دلم به غم جد تو خو گرفت، از روزه حسین دل زارم آبرو گرفت. هر گوشه مسیر ز تو می جویم نشانه ای، شوق حضور تو به دلم با هر بهانه ای. فرزند حیدر امید آخر موعود عالم یا مهدی. نشوم به جز از تو گدای کسی، نروم ز درت به هوای کسی. تو و نوح و غم به عزای حسین، به فدای تو و به فدای حسین، به فدای حسین. همه جای مسیرم از این و از آن، ز تو پرسم و جویم عیان و نهان. سخن از تو و حسن تو گویم و بس، که به نام تو زنده شود دل و جان. تو میانه خیل عزایی و من همه جا بروم به بهانه تو، همه جا بروم به بهانه تو، که مگر برسم در خانه تو. محبوب مردمان به ظهورت غم نهان شود، می آیی و زمین ز شکوهت آسمان شود. ای صاحب زمان به حضورت دل جوان شود، عدل و امید و عشق خبر روز جهان شود. فرزند حیدر امید آخر موعود عالم یا مهدی. به هوای حرم.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the session. We're with Shaykh Kazim here discussing this whole concept of intizar and our duties towards the Imam, which are really our religious duties. And we started discussing the apparent individual duties that we have, and you mentioned we have three of them: ma'rifah, mahabba, and ita'ah.
So the ma'rifah was mentioned, and we said that that's where, when I know him and recognize him and his qualities, not just proving that he's Imam, that's one part, and that we try to do in this course, but beyond that, knowing who he is, his qualities. And even if I want to make it more specific, I want to know what's his relationship to me. Even if I make it more personal, like what does he think about me? Does Imam al-Mahdi love me? Does he care for me? So this is part of ma'rifah, and therefore I even mentioned this in the last session that I had, that we have this tawqi from Imam al-Hujjah written to Sheikh Saduq.
Tawqi means a letter.
Tawqi means answer to a letter.
Answer
so
to a letter.
it was written waqqa, so it will have the seal. So that's why it's called tawqi. Waqqa alay, so he would have sealed it. So this we have recorded in the books of hadith, where he says that Inna gayru muhmalina li mura'atikum. I mentioned this, that he's telling Shaykh Sadud that, and he's talking to all the Shia. So this is a piece of marifat I need to have, that he's telling all the Shia that in ghaiba, don't think that I don't care for you. I don't have that mura'at. So ra'ayat means that someone who's concerned, who takes someone else into consideration. And وَغَيْرُ نَاسِينَ لِذِكْرِكُمْ, he is not forgotten me. So this ma'rifah would automatically like put me in that position where I would want to know more about him, and this idea of having the love of the Ahlul Bayt in general, and specifically in the time of Ghaiba, having that love of Imam of our time in our hearts. And so important is this idea of the love of Ahlul Bayt and love of the Imam, that this was asked as the recompensation for the Risala of Rasulullah. It's a big thing, because the biggest thing in this whole universe was delivering this final message, the difficulty it had. And in exchange for that, Rasulullah says, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَى. To the extent that in our narrations we have this description that وَلَّكُمُ الْمَوَدَّةُ الْوَاجِبَةُ. To an extent that this love is obligatory. It's not about a question that this expression is used. This shows that you can't do without it.
And of course, the other verse says that this ajr is for our own, it's for our own benefit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course, that the three verses, you combine them together, that he's not asking ajr for himself. There's something in this love of Ahlul Bayt and love of Imam al-Mahdi that is so unique, so special. And I say this, anyone who's felt this love wouldn't need an external proof to appreciate its importance. And we, as the followers of the madhab of Ahlul Bayt, we've all felt this love. The least I would say is the love of Imam al-Hussein, that unique position that he has. And anyone who has felt this, he can testify to, you can say, the purifying effect it has, how much energy it creates in me, how it pushes me to get closer to Allah, how it gives me strength in the times of difficulties. So
it's beautiful that this personality that we love, you see, other personalities in the world, we love them because of particular perspective of their character. Otherwise, they have other characters, other aspects of their characters that isn't good. But these personalities are personalities that are completely manifesting Allah's names. They are perfect, right? They don't have any defects in them. They are literally pure, and loving such a pure personality itself, it makes complete sense. Like, it's just...
And this love is automatic.
It's automatic.
If you have that recognition, the love is going to come, because by our nature, by our fitra, we love perfection.
Yeah.
And when you see perfection and of this level somewhere, you'll automatically fall in love. And especially when you see this perfection out in action. So the seerah of the Ahlul Bayt, when it came to dealing with the enemies, when it came to dealing with others, when it came to dealing with their family, you just read that and you say that I just fall in love with them. There's nothing else that can happen when these personalities, although I would say this here, that this idea of the importance of the love of Ahlul Bayt in general, and for us, for our context, the love of Imam al-Mahdi, and the wisdom behind it, and the role it plays, and it has played in history till today, and till the Dhuhr, it needs a separate discussion with a lot of detail. So it's amazing, and you'd even be surprised that the amount and the number of narrations that we have about Hubbu Ahlil Bayt goes in several hundreds. This shows that how important this is. And I'll even say this, that the wisdom behind it, the effects of it are still unexplored by our own selves. I'll say this here. We haven't even probably realized what dimensions it takes. Even in our individual lives, in our spiritual perfection, in social areas, this love of the Ahlul Bayt is a very, very important and powerful thing that we need to reinforce. And of course, if you want to look at the narrations, there are so many. I mean, I was just searching, and you have these narrations like 30, 40, 50 narrations, just one after another, describing this love of the Ahlul Bayt. Anyhow, I would say that, okay, now how can we strengthen this love? What are those practical ways? So, see, there are very easy ways of doing it. Probably you're missing out on some of them. For example, remembering him is a way of strengthening my love for him. And it's an automatic result, right? If I love someone, I would like to remember him. More I remember him, my love is going to increase. How can I remember him? There are simple ways. For example, on Fridays, there's a ziyarah of Imam al-Hujjah to be recited. And alhamdulillah, at least in some communities, it's a custom that on the day of Friday, after Salatul Jum'ah or in the morning, they recite this ziyarah. So we remember him. Assalamu alayka ya hujjatallahi fi ardi. Assalamu alayka ya aynallahi fi khalqi. When you recite this ziyarah, you're remembering his qualities, these perfections.
Obviously, with attention, we need to pay attention to the meaning of these.
Exactly. And definitely it's something. And then the other ziyarah, so you have ziyarat Ali Yasin, Assalamu alayka ya da'i Allahi wa rabbani ayate. So this is one way of remembering ziyarah.
And like Shaykh Mustafa said, that these personalities can see us and hear us. So when we're reciting the ziyarah, not only do we pay attention to the meaning, but we should try and realize and remind ourselves that, look, right now, as I am saying this, Imam is listening to me, and he's probably also replying to me. So we need to have that attention as well.
Exactly. So other ways would be, for example, pledging allegiance to them. So we have du'as that are meant for this purpose. The famous one is the du'a al-ahad. So where basically we are saying, we are talking to him that I'm there for you, I have that allegiance with you, and I'll be there to help you. So this is actually talking to the Imam and in reinforcing that relationship. There's one thing I'll add, because these things probably they're mentioned before, is that one of the signs of true love, if the love is really true, and we can say this here, that love has different shades. There's intense levels of intensity. Sometimes the love is weak or at a very basic level. So if the love is a true love, one of the necessary results of that is that I start loving what he loves. And what pains him becomes my pain. So automatically for me, or for a believer Shia, this should be the stage that I should think that what are those things that make him happy? Okay, those things should make me happy. I should think, what is that makes him sad? So for example, if I know, and I know this for sure, that if there's oppression going on around the world, even one single instance of oppression is going to make the heart of Imam al-Hujjah sad, without doubt. I know this, I have this ma'rifah. I should have so much love that now I can feel that his pain in my heart as well. So,
and at least in my heart, feel against this oppression.
And have that feeling that, at least even this wish, that I wish I could do something to help out.
And if I can, I should do it. But even if we're not able to, at least that
feeling
should be
is there.
Yeah.
And the last thing I would say is, one of the signs of a true lover is that when his beloved is separated for him, this separation becomes unbearable for him. Although I'm just saying this as words right now, but imagine that really someone is able to develop that relationship with the Imam, that he's really saying this with all his heart. He says, Allahumma nashku ilayka fakda nabiyina wa ghaibata waliyina. So this complaint, I should feel like doing shikwa in the presence of Allah, that, oh God, why is the Imam not there? I need to feel that. Of course, that comes with a combination of ma'rifah, mahabba and ita.
Again, in the previous session, we mentioned how Prophet Yaqub lost his sight crying for the wali of Allah. Right, and we not even remember him, let alone crying to that extent.
Yeah. So, and of course, I'm not even saying that it's something that will happen like a spike or a jump. Yeah. It's a process. Inshallah, let me start today. Let me start remembering him. Let me try and know more about him, his role, about his zuhur, what he's going to do, his characteristics. Because this is also important. I don't know if it was discussed in the previous session. Imam al-Mahdi, amongst all the awliya of Allah, has very special characteristics, because he was the one who's chosen for that ultimate promise of Allah, that global government. It's not a small thing. So if I slowly increase my ma'rifah, my remembrance, I remember him at least once a week. It's there in my mind that, okay, my Imam is there and I can speak to him, and of course with obedience, slowly and gradually. And it shouldn't even seem very far-fetched. We have had examples of individuals and people who had that connection with the Imam, that very special and close connection. So I think I'll quickly go to the next part, and that is that one of the necessary results of true love is obedience. And it just follows from love. So ma'rifah, love that leads me to obey this my beloved, because I know the position he has. He's my guide. He's my guide whom I really love. I'm attached to him, and he's there to tell me different things, and I'm going to act upon them, and that's going to take me to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
It's really interesting how we know from even psychology and also Islamic studies, we can know that one of the really important incentives for somebody to do something is if they love it, right? Or if they want to imitate somebody, is because they love that person. And so how Allah has tied the importance of loving the Ahlul Bayt, because they are a guide, so He's making it a condition that, look, love them. And we're like, oh, what's the point? Why love them? Because the wisdom behind it, that love leads to that action. So it's like really amazing how all these things fit together.
Exactly. And I would say that this exact same thing, Shaykh Mutahari explains it in one of his books. He says that, what's the wisdom behind this love of Ahlul Bayt? Because we know that ultimate goal is love of Allah. So, وَالَّذِينَ آمَنُوا أَشَدُّ حُبًّا لِلَّهِ. We know that's the ultimate goal, love of Allah. So he asked this question, that if love of Allah is the ultimate goal, why do you have this love of Ahlul Bayt with so much emphasis on it? And he goes on to explain the same thing, that Allah knows that how He's created His creation. He knows that this love is probably the most important driving factor in His life. We have narrations that tell us, هَلِ الدِّينُ إِلَّا الْحُبُّ وَالْبُغْضُ, that the reality of religion can be summarized in this driving force in my life. Who do I love? Who do I hate? That sets the direction in my life. Even you see practically today, how many people stay on the right path, stick to religion because, for example, love of Imam al-Hussein.
Yeah.
How many lives are changed by going to one Arba'in trip?
Yeah.
What's that thing is it that when they go to these trips, there's a lot of intellectual explanation given about religion? That should also be given. But the primary driving force is that love. That's so what drives us.
A lot of times we judge people who are not so intellectual, but they go to masajid and they get involved in azadari and stuff like that, and we feel like he's very basic, but we don't realize that this love is actually the thing that sparks, and they might go very further in life, much further than what we would. And we've seen in history how people, because of their love for Hazrat Zahra, for Imam Mahdi, they would go and sacrifice their lives for Islam. And although from a apparent perspective they are normal people, you wouldn't see much in them, but that love in the end led them to a good ending, basically.
Yeah, definitely. And there's so much in this idea of love of the Ahlul Bayt that it's probably, like you can say, the most important thing that we should pay attention to. So I would even say that any effort taken towards increasing this love. So example, 15th Sha'ban is coming. So if we should make it really big, really prominent, invite other people from Ahlul Sunnah, from other sects, for our own people, for our own children, so that love is transferred to them. It's maximized in our communities. And of course, we always would couple that love with ma'rifah, because they have to be hand in hand. And that's the right combination that would lead us to the obedience that we're looking. So when you look at the narrations that we have, they clearly tell us that why this love of Ahlul Bayt is so important. So I'll just read one of these. It's a very beautiful narration. So here, it clearly tells us that the reason why the love of the Ahlul Bayt has been given so much importance is because that's what leads us to action and amal. Okay, so let me read this narration for you. So this is from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. This is in Al-Kafi. You can see volume 1, page 194. It's a very beautiful narration. So Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam says, La yuhibbuna abdun wa yatawallana hatta yutahhirallahu kalbahu. So see, love of Ahlul Bayt, one of the results that it brings, and I think we can feel that and experience that it purifies the heart. وَلَا يُطَهِّرُ اللَّهُ كَلْبَ عَبْدٍ حَتَّى يُسَلِّمَ لَنَا. It's like you love the Ahlul Bayt, you come a step closer to them. That connections gives you some purity of heart. That purity of heart now brings you that, okay, now I should submit to them. I should obey them. I mean, who else should I obey if not the Ahlul Bayt? Then he says, وَيَكُونَ سِلْمًا لَنَا. So when I submit to him, I become silm with him. Silm means I become complete in harmony with the Ahlul Bayt. So silm comes from salam, and when you say assalamu alaik means that I'm in complete harmony with you, no enmity. So this فَإِذَا كَانَ سِلْمًا لَنَا سَلَّمَهُ اللَّهُ مِنْ شَدِيدِ الْحِسَابِ. If I am in harmony with the Ahlul Bayt and their way of life and their teachings, and I submit to it, that saves me. That's my salvation. On the day of judgment, I'll be saved. Sallamahullah. So Allah is going to save us from the shadid al-hisab, from a difficult accounting. Wa amanahu min faza'i yawmil qiyamatil akbar. And that's what we want. So all of us, we're striving for our own salvation. We want to reach that realm in a state of safety. Min al-faza'il akbar. So the Quran says, how does that happen? This chain comes. That you love the Ahlul Bayt, it gives you some purity, you submit to them. When you submit to them, your life becomes in harmony with their way of life. That leads you to your salvation. So it's a complete chain, and it's not something we can do without it. It's necessary. We have to undertake this path. It's not an option that has been given to us, that you either take this path or you have another option that you can avail.
Yeah, so it's important to pay attention to the fact that the love of it's not we're not going to be saved from the punishment or from a heavy accounting arbitrarily just because we love. It's because that love leads to actions, and that actions leads to that purity, and therefore the effect of this is that on the day of judgment we won't go through that punishment. So it's not just like okay, because we've ascribed ourselves to the Ahlul Bayt and claim to love them, straight we go to paradise for no reason at all, just for this reason. It's actually the love is actually because it's going to translate itself into actions. So if we have a love that doesn't translate itself into actions, we need to reassess our love, because that's not true love then.
Yeah. And in fact, it leads to contradiction and weakening of the love. And in worst case, someone can completely lose that love. I mean, there's no guarantee that this love would remain forever, because love leads to action. But if I'm going to be doing actions that are detested by my beloved, it's going to cause an internal contradiction, and I'm going to eventually see that actually I don't love him actually truly, because he's not happy with me and I don't care. So it's like this. So it's like,
what kind of love is that?
He's saying that, look, I'm not happy with you, you're doing these things. You say, no, but I love you. Inside my heart, I know that, come on, it doesn't work like that. And there's a very beautiful piece of poetry attributed to Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. It's come in some books of narrations. It doesn't matter. I'm not saying to say that it's definitely attributed to him as from him, but the poetry is like this. So he says, "Ta'sil ilah wa anta tudhir hubbahu." So speaking to an audience, he's saying that you disobey Allah and you announce that you love Him. هذا لعمري في الفعال بديء. Saying that by Allah, this is like this doesn't make any sense. It's a very strange, unique badi'a thing. It's a new thing. I have never seen something like this. Then he says, لو كان حبك صادقا لأطعته. If your love, it's this respect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So he's saying, if your love with respect to Allah was true, you'd have obeyed Him. Innal muhibba liman yuhibbu muti'u. They're saying that any lover with respect to his beloved, the person he loves, he is obedient. So this idea of, and I'll even mention this. So this Ayatollah Tahriri also brings in his book, and it's there in. So this same thing that you mentioned, this is very important. That only love doesn't. It's a good step. It's a sign of purity. I would even say it's a fadilat. It's a distinction to have that love of Ahlul Bayt in our hearts, but it needs to be completed. The chain needs to complete with ita. So I'll just read this narration because it's very beautiful. All these narrations are. So this again is in. This is Shaykh Hur Amali narrates this in Wasa'il al-Shia, and we have many narrations of this same content. So he says, although this is a bit very powerful and very clear, that the Ahlul Bayt are making this point very, very clear. He says, Wallahi, is swearing by Allah. This is from Imam al-Baqir. Ma ma'ana min Allahi bara. Don't think that we own this, that we can randomly save you from, for example, Allah's punishment. Wala baynana wa bayna Allahi karaba. So he's saying, don't think that we have a family relationship with God, so that we can vouch for somebody saying that, oh, I mean, come on, we are family, so just let him go to paradise. Then he says, wala lana ala Allahi hujja. Don't think that we have a certain hujja and excuse with respect to Allah, whatever you people will do. That's not the case. It says, وَلَا نَتَقَرَّبُ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا بِالطَّاعَةِ. Very, very clear. Saying that if you want to get closer to Allah, and which we all want, that's the purpose of life, the sole way is ta'ah.
Yeah. And the Imams themselves got this position because of the ta'ah, not because of any other relation. The secret behind their lofty station is that obedience to Allah, is that tawheed, and therefore for us also to be their lovers and also get to Allah, we have to obey them.
They said, فَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ مُطِيئًا لِلَّهِ تَنْفَعُهُ وِلَايَتُنَا. So I was referring to this, that you have our wilayah, you love us, you want this wilayah to benefit you when you really need it on the Day of Judgment. The option is that you have to be muti, you have to obey them. وَمَنْ كَانَ مِنْكُمْ عَاصِيًا لِلَّهِ لَنْ تَنْفَعْهُ وِلَايَتُنَا. Then he says, وَيْحَكُمْ لَا تَقْتَرُّ وَيْحَكُمْ لَا تَقْتَرُّ. He's saying, if I translate it literally, this is, woe unto you, don't be deceived. Yes, we have emphasized the love so much, and it is very important. Our love has these many benefits, but don't be deceived. That had its own wisdom to lead you to our obedience. So I think obedience is that very, very important conclusion that we draw. And I would just add this one last thing, and then we'll go to the social part, and that is that when we say obedience to the Ahlul Bayt, obedience to them in everything. We can't pick and choose. And this tells us many, many important things. One is that the ahadith of the Ahlul Bayt are very important. So this idea of disregarding the hadith and saying, for example, Hasbuna Kitabullah, only the Quran. So Quran, in addition to the Holy Quran, we have these amazing ahadith from the Ahlul Bayt, and in all different aspects. I need to take my ahkam and practical laws from the Ahlul Bayt, and that's what I get when I refer to my marja. That's the foolproof way of living my life according to the ahkam as explained by the Ahlul Bayt. I have hujjah, I have excuse that I did the taqleed of the alam. I wasn't expert myself, but I referred to the best possible expert in the field. But that's not it. I want to become spirituality. How do I approach it? I need to approach it through the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. I can't, for example, just take just one or two narrations and then top it up with other types of spirituality, bring so many other ideas of my own, and then say that, okay, this is I'm going to approach spirituality. No, there's a way. And we just discuss about this. For example, the hadith of Unwan al-Basri. So Imam as-Sadiq is laying out that blueprint of spirituality in that how do you approach it, where do you start, what do you do, and of course it needs explanation, and therefore you need to refer to the expert. So for example, Ayatollah Tahriri, being the expert in the field of spirituality, having spent good 40, 50 years of his life studying these narrations, thinking about them, trying to make the links between different parts, learning from his teachers. He's given us this beautiful explanation that, look, this is the blueprint, this is how you approach spirituality based on the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt.
And just like we have experts in ahkam who are the maraja, we also have experts in akhlaq and spirituality who are these kind of spiritual scholars who have worked on this topic, and this is their expertise, and we should refer to them in that as well.
What better than having one of the top experts writing an amazing book, and that also is being translated into English, that we can really benefit. I'd even suggest that take this book, find a scholar, ask him to teach this to you.
Yeah.
And when I was translating, because I had the opportunity to do it, this book, this one single book, probably has more than 1,000 narrations in it.
Wow.
So, and that's what he says in the beginning, that this way I'm describing is the way of Ahlul Bayt. And I'm going to refer every single thing I'm saying back to the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt. So,
and it's important to remember that himself being a mujtahid, he understanding the whole, having a comprehensive understanding of the Quran and Hadith, knows how to understand each of the Hadith in their own context. Therefore, for a mujtahid like him to put all of these together and come up with a beautiful, comprehensive explanation of the spiritual aspect in Islam is really valuable.
And what he's done in this book and even his other books is that in addition to giving us a comprehensive understanding, he has made it into a system. And that's what's important, because the narrations of the Ahlul Bayt are scattered. One Imam said this thing, one Imam said that thing. This is the work of a mujtahid, that he takes all this, he gives us a comprehensive understanding and draws it out into a system. And he will define steps for it. He'll have different classifications in there that are really, really going to be helpful in approaching spirituality. And not only spirituality, my family life. I have to go back to the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt. My business, for example, how do I do my business, and what are my business priorities? For example, we have guidance from Ahlul Bayt. Probably these are areas we haven't explored. I would even take it to another scale, but I won't discuss it here. This will come in the later section. Is that let's take it to a bit more complex scale. That, for example, things like our educational system, our schools. Why shouldn't we model and design our schools based on the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt? They have so much to say about education.
I think a lot of people don't even realize that we can have such a thing.
So that's why I said that it's another scale, another level, because I think many times when we're talking about the teachings of the Ahlul Bayt, we might limit ourselves in the framework of ahkam, akhlaq, spirituality. At the most, tarbiyah, family matters. At the most, you say that the halal and haram of ahkam and business, and all of that is absolutely necessary. This beyond. For example, I'll give you an example. Why shouldn't we have our community organization and leadership based on the teachings of Islam? You go and open Nahj al-Balagha. You have the letter Imam Ali alayhi salam wrote to Malik al-Ashtar. And those instructions are not instructions only for Malik al-Ashtar, only for that setting. And they're instructions for an Islamic way of leadership. So, for example, one of the things he emphasizes there in other places is that someone who's leading a community of Muslims, one of the qualities he needs to have is this idea of being adil, for example, the pious leader. Okay, so all these inspirations and teachings, and believe me, if these teachings are plugged in to our individual lives, our family lives, and our social systems, our educational system, our community organization, our leadership, it will produce that result that has been promised. So this title of obeying the Ahlul Bayt has so many dimensions to it, and it's something which we can keep exploring. And this is, I'll just mention this last thing, this brings us to this idea that, look, Ahlul Bayt and obeying Allah and reaching perfection is one and the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's two sides of one coin. They are the tariq, they are the path, they are the source of knowledge. They are telling me what steps I need to take to be successful in all these different areas of my life. So that's why we say it's so fundamental. The position of Imam and their teachings and Imam al-Mahdi is so important in our life. So I think we'll finish a discussion regarding individual duties. We don't have a lot of time, but I think at least whatever time is remaining, we can now discuss the social dimension of helping the Imam and preparing for his return.
Okay, brilliant. So we've talked about the individual responsibilities, the apparent responsibilities, which were to have the ma'rifah, to have the muhabba, and then to have the ita'a of the imams. So you mentioned that there was a fourth one, which was the nusra aspect, which is the helping aspect, and you said that's the social aspect of our intidar, or our waiting, our active waiting for the imam. So should we get started on that?
Yeah. So this brings us to a new level. That's why I put it under our social duty, because up until here I can completely work in a very individualistic setting. I can say my ma'rifah of the imam as an individual, my love of the imam, and my obedience to the imam. And technically speaking, I'm using this word technically, if I follow these 3 steps, I would ensure my salvation. Okay. But the relationship with the imam and duty towards the imam does not end here. And there's a 4th duty that we have, and that's the duty of nusra. And when I say duty, some instances of it at least become obligatory and wajib. And the example would be that I'm giving the least. For example, it's obligatory to save the life of the imam. I think there's no one who's going to question the obligation of that. Yeah. And it's a type of nusrat and helping the imam. So I'm just giving some very clear examples. Otherwise, you can define that the amount of obligatory duty you have. But this concept of helping the imam is very important if you keep in mind their social position. And we describe this, that they were sent for a very huge social mission, a global mission. And we all know this. It's very clear, it's obvious that one person cannot perform and do a global duty and a mission, and can't have a global project running with one individual running. It doesn't make sense. You need hierarchy of individuals, organization, in order to put this in place. And this is exactly what's needed for the imam to fulfill that final mission. And we describe this, that because imam did not have these the hierarchy of helpers, okay, all different types of helpers that he needs, the guidance did not materialize, and that led to this long period of ghaibah. So helping the imam in our context in ghaibah today, because that's what's important, right? Because making very specific that how today I should be helping the imam. I can summarize it in one line by saying that helping the imam today means to prepare for his reappearance. When he would reappear, helping the imam would mean to assist him to establish himself. When he's established himself, assisting imam would mean to be his governor and go and rule on his behalf, and be part of his system of guidance. Because he's going to have a system of guidance. It's not something that it's going to happen automatic. One person, like in a supernatural manner, is going to give guidance to everyone. No, it will happen through a system. So
when you say our responsibility today is to prepare, what do you mean now by preparing at a social level?
So we came one step further. We said that here we want to prepare for his reappearance. What do I need to prepare for his reappearance? I need to undo those causes that led to his ghaibah. So it's a logical connection, right? So we mentioned,
you said one of the main ones was that the presence of oppressors who would inhibit him taking that position.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you remember that discussion, we spoke about 3 things.
Yeah.
One is that his life was in danger. Yakhaful qatl. He did not have enough helpers. The third thing we mentioned was that public acceptance and that universal awakening and that feeling that we need a savior wasn't there. So that thing. And of course the fourth thing is that the oppressors are there. Of course the idea of oppressors is also linked to the first one, that it's the oppressors that would be wanting to kill him. Although the oppressors will do many other things to stop him from implementing the guidance. Okay, so if you put these things together, then we come to this collective duty of slowly and gradually undoing these things that led to his ghaibah. And I just want to, before I mention that how exactly it's going to happen, very briefly, under each of these 3 points, I'll mention a few things. I just want to come back to this idea that this preparation for him to come, and the world is waiting, and a time would come that people would realize that we really need a savior. It can only happen if the Shia, okay, and we spoke about this, that they can only do it if they unite, if they connect to each other around the world, and if they're going to come to this understanding that all of us together, we have a mission, we have a duty, we have something very big and amazing to do, and that is put those pieces together, that a time comes that the Imam can come.
It's very important. Unity doesn't mean that we have to agree in everything, right? Unity means that, look, let's work together for that one purpose and agree to disagree on certain integrities, right? We insist that if I want to unite with the other person, they have to agree with my opinion. Well, then we're never going to unite, right? So unity doesn't mean agreeing on everything. Unity means that let's agree to disagree, but together in our differences, and let's work together.
And one of the things that is going to bring us together is that sense of purpose, and realizing its importance, that it's a big mission, and that also is going to tell us that we cannot be, for example, fighting with each other for petty issues. Disagreements will always be there. You cannot delete these disagreements, but we'll have to learn to deal with these and keeping that common sense of purpose intact. We need to have that sense of purpose and that direction that's there.
And just to mention that a lot of times we think that unity means to approve of the other side's beliefs. For example, we might have disagreements, sometimes even major disagreements in certain aspects, right? Especially when it comes to the Sunni brothers, we feel that, okay, how does unity conform with us believing in the wilaya of Imam Ali and his khilafah as the first imam, and they don't agree with this? How can we unite? But that's exactly what unity means. Agree to disagree, have these bigger differences, but let's work together. It's more of a working practically together rather than saying that, by uniting I'm accepting your belief, right? So amongst the Shias, again, it's the same thing. If you want to unite amongst the Shias, it doesn't mean we're approving the other person's specific belief that we disagree with. We're saying let's work together at a practical level. Let's come together and work towards this one thing that we all agree upon.
And that's definitely possible. And because that's not happening at a massive scale, we're deprived from the presence of the Imam. And what's very, very interesting is this exact same thing I mentioned has been said by Imam al-Mahdi himself. So I'll read this very interesting thing. So this is quoted by Shaykh Tabarsi in his al-Ihtijaj. So in his book he quotes. So he's quoting from one of the books of Shaykh Mufid that Imam al-Hujjah wrote to Shaykh Mufid. So it's one of those communications that happened. It's a few lines. I'm not going to read all of it. It starts like this. وَنَحْنُ نَعْحَدُ إِلَيْكَ أَيُّهَا الْوَلِيُّ الْمُجَاهِدِ. He's referring to Shaykh Mufid as al-Waliyu al-Mujahid. I'm going to read this part. So he's speaking to the Shia here. So he says, وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَشْيَاعَنَا وَفَّقَهُمُ اللَّهُ لِتَاءَتِهِ. If my Shia, may Allah grant them the tawfiq to obey Allah, ala ijtima'im min al-qulub. If their hearts were together, in what? Fil wafa'i bil ahdi alayhim. In fulfilling that allegiance that's upon them with respect to the Imam. So the allegiance of Nusra, of helping him, preparing the grounds for him. لَمَا تَأَخَّرَ أَنْهُمُ الْيُمْنُ بِلِقَائِنَا. This blessing of meeting us, meeting me, meeting Mahdi, wouldn't have been delayed from them for even a moment. So this shows that this social duty, which means connection of the believers, their hearts coming together, is that critical thing that, and we all need to work on that.
Yeah.
If
we
I can connect anywhere with any one of the Shias, they're doing a similar thing, I need to connect. I need to help them. We need to come together in this, the divine duty that we have.
And a lot of this goes back to the personal duty of submitting to Allah and refining our own attributes, right? When we're talking about uniting with others and working with others, it means that not having bad opinions about others. It means not doing ghibat of others. It means not deceiving others. It means helping others. If you have a business, for example, if there's a Shia brother who is in need of help, give him a job, for example. I don't know. These kind of things need to work. If you're an employer, respect your employee. We forget that social unity actually goes back to our own personal obedience to Allah and refining our character. And we cannot have unity if we're not going to refine our character. So these two go really hand in hand, and we need to really
and
hardly
I would
work.
even add to that, it's even beyond that. When it comes to the other believers, it's not just about helping them. It's about being patient when they make mistake. So it's even beyond that. So this Shia brother of mine, he's deliberately making mistake. Okay. Yet I have to forgive him, be with him. Why? Because he has that wilaya of the Ahlul Bayt. And even sometimes you go a step further, you'll have to even show that patience and leniency with other Muslims. Because with them also, in some ways, we share a common purpose. We need to even get their energy channelized in this mission of implementing divine guidance. So
there's that fine line between approving someone's mistakes and being patient with regards to those mistakes, right? We have to bear, and we can't have everything our own way. So we need to refine ourselves and be patient in society, not judge people, not have bad opinions about people, and really we need to work on these things to reform our society.
And eventually, if this patience is there, that person who's making a mistake will eventually slowly start changing. And that's my duty. I need to bring him closer, not push away people, not say that, okay, you disagree with me, I can't work with you at all. No, we shouldn't have this attitude. So,
and even that greed and that thirst for position, what a beautiful society and united society when a person sees that, this other brother is more deserving than me to take this position. Brother, why don't you come and you lead, for example, this organization or this initiative, for example. It's true I started it. It's true I've put a lot of effort. But I can see that your qualities are better than mine. You come in my place, and because we're all working for Allah at the end of the day. When our society can reach this point where we're ready to, leave our positions and that fame that comes with it and so on for that greater good, then I think there's no reason that Imam Mahdi would, keep us waiting even more. Right? This is something we need to get to.
Yeah, and inshallah, I read this part of this communication between Shaykh Mufid and Imam al-Hujjah, because he's also emphasizing on it that this is that key, that unity and connection, and we're working together to do it, because it can only happen. The task is so massive that it's a collective effort. So I would just go very briefly through these three things I mentioned. So one thing that the Imam needs, and this is part of our preparation for his dhuhur, is he needs helpers. And we mentioned this, that the lack of helpers was one of the primary reasons that he couldn't reach that position that he needed to implement the guidance. So that needs to be undone. That needs to be worked upon. So this is a question, right, that when we know there'll be a point in time that Imam is going to come back, for sure. Question, when he comes back, at that same moment, he will need people to help him. Are those people who would be helping the Imam at that moment, they are not going to land from the sky or just pop out from the ground? No. Yeah. Definitely there would be a preparation. We'll have families, individuals, peoples, communities, and these communities having some groundwork ready whereby they would produce these individuals, because helper of the Imam is produced through tarbiyah, through training, and through his own efforts. And
so there's an active process going on before the Imam comes to make sure these are produced.
And if you want to get an insight into who these helpers of Imam al-Hujjah are, we'll have to go through all these narrations that we have regarding Ansarul Mahdi. So we have this title in our narrations that they describe the qualities of those people who would be the helpers of Imam al-Hujjah. And there you can go through this thing that there'll be those top 313, that highest and the closest link between Imam al-Hujjah and the people and the nest. So basically he's going to build a hierarchy of people under him, and everyone under him in some way it will be his helper. So that's going to be there, and there are many narrations that talk about the qualities that are there. So there's no time to go into the details.
Yeah.
So for example, in one of the narrations it says that Humun Nujaba al-Fuqaha al-Qudat al-Hukam. This is talking about those 313. They have a very distinguished position, and there's a mention of these, the descriptions of these 313.
And clearly, if they're going to be the people who are helping him establish that system and a just system as well, they have to have very lofty qualities to be able to, represent the Imam in this system.
So
right?
they'll be fuqaha, they'll be mujtahideen,
they'll have the deep knowledge of Islam.
They'll be qudat, they'll be able to judge Islamically, and they'll be hukam, they'll know governance. So these qualities would be there for these 313. Then there's another narration, maybe a bit broader than the 313, which describes Ashabul Mahdi. Says, Qulubuhum kazubur al-hadid. Their hearts are strong as iron, like they're firm in their hearts. And there's a very, very beautiful description of them. Ruhbanun fil layl, luyuthun fil nahar. This is very beautiful. It says that when you look at them at nights, and basically it's giving us indications that we need to bring ourselves up to this level. Our children, our communities, we should create those systems where you can have these people who are ruhbanun bil layl. When you see them at nights, you think that these are those people who have left the world. They are these ascetics who have nothing but ibadat to do. They're spending their nights in ibadat. But when you see them during daytime, luyuthun finna, they are like fierce lions in the daytime. So active, so confident, ready to take challenges that are there. And it's not just describing the challenges that would be there in terms of the military conflict that's there. No, even today.
In terms of being active and doing what needs to be done.
Yeah, right? And being that confident and not backing out. Not, if you face a challenge, say that, oh, I can't do this.
It's too difficult for me,
Being like a lion and being there, being confident, being present there. So you can go through all these traits.
These traits don't come in one day, right? This is a gradual process. Even when you talk about worshipping Allah at night, the whole night or a big part of the night, it's not something you just decide, okay, I'm going to start doing it. It comes with growth, and it comes with guidance as well, right? We can't just decide that, okay, it's one prescription for everybody to stay up the whole night. And it comes with guidance.
With guidance, and as you mentioned before, that it comes with that obedience of the Ahlul Bayt. So we need to start from there. So as you say, we need to start from basics, slowly build our personality, our insight, that eventually we hope that we reach a station where will even be considered worthy of serving him. Because it's a distinction to be able to be of any benefit for the Imam. And imagine that if he says that I accept you as my helper, that's the highest distinction any person can get. But it needs that foundation, that obedience has to be there. And I think you mentioned it's important that it happens gradually. We need to approach the things in the correct manner. So this is a whole section, because I just wanted to allude to different parts of it, but many narrations speak about it. There are details, there are interesting details. So there are narrations that describe these 313, which areas they would be from. So there's a description. There's a mention, for example, that 50 of these 313 will be women. So we have narrations that speak about this. We have other details about how they would, what qualities they would have. For example, one of them says, "Ulaika hum khiyarul ummah." So So they're like the best of the ummah, the distinction that would hold, and many other narrations. And it would need its own time. And it would be interesting thing that someone just comes and says that, look, in our narrations, the Ashabul Mahdi are described in this manner. It's very inspiring. Their qualities and how they will be helping the Imam. What it tells us is that Imam needs these people. And we know historically he did not have enough supporters. Yeah. So he needs those very elite 313, spiritually elite. Yeah. And he also needs a wide and large range of other helpers. Because again, we shouldn't say that Imam with 313, these 314 people are going to sort everything. No, it's a system. It's a hierarchy where this wilaya is going to flow until it reaches the people. The guidance has to become universal.
It's to the benefit of all. It's not just to the benefit of just those 313.
Exactly. The other thing that's needed, and we said this, right, that one of the reasons that led to his ghaiba was presence of oppressors, and the last and the worst thing they would do is to just kill him, just martyr the Imam and get rid of him, because they don't want the divine guides to be present. It's against their desires, it's against their love of power and what they're after in this dunya. So one of the things that would be definitely necessary when the Imam comes back, and this would require preparation, is that the Shia would have to make some arrangement. Again, I don't want to specify, or maybe I don't even know what it, that his life can be protected. Because it shouldn't happen, he comes and we have no arrangement, no way of ensuring that his life is protected. The oppressors are going to come after him. Yeah. And if someone wants to even think in today's context, it's even harder, because today you have these weapons whereby targeted killings is much more easier than probably it was in those, definitely it was in those olden days. So this is another aspect. But in what format exactly this needs to be done,
this is a
the
whole
Shia
new
would
discussion,
have to think
basically.
about it.
This is a whole new discussion.
It's a whole new discussion, and for now we don't need to go into it. But I'm just presenting this idea that his life needs to be protected. It's an important preparation that needs to be done. The third thing, which I'd say is quite important, I'll end there. My time is up. Is that even if, let's say, he has those helpers, and there's arrangement made by the Shia as a whole to protect him, but he comes and the majority of the people in the world say that we don't want you. Or they come and say that, who are you? Why do we even need you?
What do you have to offer?
What do you have to
different?
Offer? Yeah. Or at times it becomes so, it says that we are happy with our current life. We don't see any problem.
Or we see the problem, but for us, we've accepted to live in this state.
So what happens to this then? So this, we again come back to the idea we discussed before, that public acceptance to some level, again, we're not quantifying it, saying this percentage, to a level that would ensure that now he can actually go and start implementing the guidance. That amount of public awareness and awakening would be necessary.
And this is where the role of each and everyone comes in terms of spreading the message and understanding it ourselves and then going to spread the message.
This can happen in many different ways. Sometimes we may think that the only way to spread this message is to, for example, catch a non-Muslim and try and explain him the idea of Imam al-Mahdi. Of course, I'm saying if you can do it, go for it. If you see that the environment is ready, for example, you have a friend in your office, you have a good relationship with him, he's interested in Islam and these ideas, yes. Because this is the maximum we want, that if we can understand this idea of Imam al-Mahdi and
what he has to offer,
and we can buy him into this reality of Imam al-Mahdi, that's definitely. But it's not something that we can do at a very mass scale right now, at least. But we shouldn't think that this is the only way. There are so many different ways of creating that awakening today, and you can think of so many different ways. For example, making people realize that this life they're living with the current system that's running the modern world is not good for them. It's not something that's worked for humanity.
Making them realize that right now, what humanity, where it's reached, basically human knowledge has failed, right? In terms of getting that prosperity that it was promising it will bring, right? The modern world promised a certain prosperity but this has only been actualized for very few people. We can see most of the globe is in poverty, is in difficulties, in war, in famine.
But I would say this, that seeing this is not easy in today's world. And I would say even this, forget about non-Muslims. Even for many of the Shia, to see the reality of the world today, the way it is not an easy thing. There's a good number of people amongst the Shia who think that no, everything is fine. The world is going ahead properly, there's progress, technology is advancing, and everything is good. Yeah, there are small problems in here and there, and that are going to be there anyways, even if the Imam comes. So this is a thing that first we as Shias need to work upon it. That do we really have a good perception of what's going on there in the world, or no? We are shielded from reality by this huge media network that selectively shows us reality that it likes. I know it might sound like a bit of, like you're saying, it's like a conspiracy theory. Okay, don't believe in it because I'm saying it right now, but let's go into it.
Let's look into it and see if it's true or not.
I mean, if I start giving examples, you'll see that no, the reality is different. So just to give one small example, if you want to know the reality, what's the best way? Go and look at statistics. Don't read WhatsApp. Don't read even these big news channels. They'll selectively... There's these websites and things online that show you statistics that, look, this is the reality out there. So you just go into the statistics of what's happening around the world and you'll say that, oh, they're living in a crazy world that's like...
It's in a mess.
It's in a big mess. So you just take example. So they say that every year 8 million people die in African continent. Why? There's no food. Hunger. Come on. So I'm sure my audience, the respected audience, wouldn't believe it, that we're living in 21st century. It's a modern world. What are you talking about? Okay, go and search online. I mean, we have enough food around the world, but you have people dying. How many people? 8 million a year. Divided by 365 days, that's like close to 3,000 people dying every single day, not because of war, not because of violence, because there's no food. And this is one very small example. I think we need to explore this whole idea.
In terms of exploring the idea, we mentioned it before. We have a course on the website by Shaykh Kazim, actually, Insight in an Era of Perplexities. I think that's what it's called. And it's a course where we're actually discussing this, trying to understand what is insight in Basira, in social matters, and trying to get a bit of a glimpse of what you're saying.
And
basically.
that means that we'll have to read a lot. We'll have to go through these things which are not so easily available on media, and so that in first step we can ourselves form the right perception of the reality. And believe me, when we start looking at this reality, you really feel so sad. You said that only Imam can fix this. We'll try. We are trying. We'll fix every single thing we can fix. But we need to build that energy and tell everyone around the world. We need to shout to the world that, look, the world is in a mess. These theories, these systems that are running the world, they are based on pure greed. Some of these systems, the capitalistic system, the way they run economy, it's just pure greed. They just want profit. So this whole idea of profit over people, it's happening. What these big companies do, we need to know what they're doing. They're causing havoc around the world. If we know,
and we're just ignorant and just letting it happen because we don't really know.
Yeah, sometimes we feel sad we don't even know this happening. So the first step would be know ourselves, and when we realize that, okay, this is the thing, then we have even a higher duty to tell the whole world, starting of course from a small place, that telling people that, look, this is the situation of the world. This system can't help you. This is one step. This might look very unrelated to Imam al-Mahdi and Zuhur, but no, this is the link.
This is the link.
If people start thinking that this system doesn't work, doesn't solve the problems of humanity, doesn't take us to what they claim.
So what's the alternative to this?
So until and unless people don't get this idea around the world that we need an alternative, and some general things about this alternative should also be clear. So the thing you mentioned, that human intellect has kind of not given the results. So this idea that we should look for a beyond human source, maybe in some religion, maybe somewhere, maybe promoting this idea of having a savior who would spread justice,
and
focusing
reminding
on justice.
a lot of people are religious and have this concept of a savior in their religion, reminding them that this is the savior who's supposed to come.
And this is the energy that sometimes we even not take into consideration. No, if we have this idea of a savior which is there in other religions, that's the reason that Prophet Isa would come with Imam al-Mahdi, that because when the Christians would see their leader, their prophet, with this savior, that would completely, at least the believers amongst the Christians, they would come and join this movement that would happen.
Asantum. Now we need to end the session because we've gone out of time, but there's a really important question which I think we should address. It would be unfortunate not to address this because it's a source of doubt for certain people, because we have this in ahadith. And although if anybody thinks about what we've discussed so far, the doubt shouldn't come. But because it has been mentioned by the ahadith, I think it's good if we solve it right now and basically close this chapter. And that is that we have in ahadith allusions that when it's the time of ghaiba, we should stay in our houses and not be active and wait. And which is why I started in the beginning by saying that, we're supposed to be doing intidhar, we're supposed to be waiting. Right? And you brought this concept of active intidhar and you've explained it, and it makes a lot of sense. But then what do we do with those ahadith? Do we just put them aside, say there's da'if, or what's going on there?
Okay, so this is a important question, because all we have discussed, if this doubt is there, then it might lead to confusion. That okay, this makes sense intellectually based on the verses of the Quran and everything, but what can we do? The Ahlul Bayt have told us that no one should rise during the time of Ghaiba. So what happens to these narrations? So yes, there are these narrations. So even if you want, I'll read one of them for you.
Okay.
So there's a set of narrations. So one of them I would read for you is, so there's this narration that's narrated in the books of Ahadith. This is in Usul al-Kafi. So it says, كُلُّ رَأْيَةٍ تُرْفَعُ قَبْلَ قِيَامِ الْقَائِمِ فَصَاحِبُهَا طَاغُوتٌ يُعْبَدُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ. So it says that any flag that's raised before the uprising of the Qa'im, of Imam al-Mahdi, then the holder of that flag, means that person who's revolting, because the flag is a sign of a revolting
revolution,
movement, a revolution, saying that the holder of that flag, basically the person who's doing that qiyam, is taghut. Okay, so taghut is a heavy word.
Basically somebody who's
rebelled against Allah. So if you want to say it in very briefly,
he's usurping basically that position that the Ahlul Bayt were supposed to be taking.
يُعْبَدُ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ, he's worshipping other than Allah. So this is one narration, and we have narrations with a similar meaning. So this is there in a riwayat. So one of the key things while dealing with narrations or the Holy Quran, the content, was that we said that we have to see other narrations, other verses of the Quran. Looking at this one narration and just deriving a conclusion saying that, okay, so this says that during Ghaiba, no one is supposed to have an uprising, a revolt against the oppressors. So basically you just be very quiet and probably do those individual things that you're doing, because it doesn't contradict with uprising, right? I mean, you can keep doing your individual duties, but no one is allowed to openly oppose the oppressors, raise a flag against them, or even establish a government.
Exactly, preparing that infrastructure we were talking about that's going to protect the Imam when he comes, right? We said that protection is not just like, a few people here and there, but it's like a proper infrastructure. And
they'll have to be in place. So we'll go back to the methodology that was explained and saying that we have these narrations, but we have narrations on the other side that approve of certain types of uprising. So this is very interesting. So I'll go through some of these. So I could have taken two different approaches to answer this question. One approach, which I'm not taking right now, is to say that we have these narrations. Let's look at the experts and how they've understood it. That's one approach, right? So I don't want to go into the technical details of why they have reached this conclusion, but I have even worked that out, but there's no time. I would show, because they discuss this in Dars Kharij. So many of these narrations they bring. So I went through like 5 of the contemporary fuqaha, well-known ones. They've discussed these narrations, and all of them, they say that these narrations don't say that any uprising absolutely is forbidden. There are certain types of uprising that the Imams warned against, and they mentioned which type of uprising. So that's one approach to take, and that's even a fair approach, because if you have narrations which sound a bit confusing, that seem to go against our understanding about the dhuhur, the ghaiba, and our duties, and we need to be active, the first thing, or one of the things that we should do is that, okay, let me see how experts have understood it. Okay, why they've understood it, you can even go through it. In the Kharij, they will discuss that. But if you look at the conclusion, you can see that maybe if I get time, I'll read one of them as well. The method tells us that you have these narrations, but look at other narrations. So we have other narrations that talk about the Ahlul Bayt approving some of these uprisings. So I'll mention both types. So there were actual uprisings happening that time that the Imams approved. So I'll give 2 examples. That the second one is stronger than the first one. So we have narrations whereby we have a narration whereby Imam Zainul Abidin kind of approved the uprising of Mukhtar, for example, or the uprising of Tawabin wasn't condemned by the Ahlul Bayt. It happened in front of them. They knew about it, wasn't condemned. But a more clear example which I would like to mention here is the one about the uprising of Zayd al-Shahid. So let me read this narration for you as well. So the clear example where the Imams approved of an uprising in their own times is the uprising of Zayd al-Shahid. So there's a narration from Imam Sadiq. He says, "La taqulu kharaja Zayd." Don't say that Zayd rebelled. He was a rebel, because kharaj and khuruj had a negative meaning that time. So even if you remember that after the event of Karbala, when the Ahlul Bayt were introduced in Sham and in Kufa, they're saying that these are Khawarij. So Khawarij means man kharaja alal imam al-haq. So this idea was there that you have these people who have the right to rule, the Khalifa, and anyone who goes against is a rebel, and that had a negative. So Imam is saying, La taqulu kharaja Zayd. Don't say he rebelled. He says, فَإِنَّ زَيْدًا كَانَ عَالِمًا وَكَانَ صَدُوقًا وَلَمْ يَدَأُكُمْ إِلَى نَفْسِهِ. So this is a place where we'll see some of the scholars have said that those riwayat which say that any flag that would be raised before the Qiyam of Mahdi, where that person is inviting people to himself for his personal benefits. And we had examples of uprisings at the time of the Imams where people just were misusing the name of the Ahlul Bayt and inviting people to themselves. The famous example, I think this, we should also go through some of this history. It's very interesting. Bani Abbas, they took charge of government from Banu Umayyah, misusing the name of the Ahlul Bayt.
The support they got was because of that.
So they started with this. So there's whole historical events, if you go into that these Banu Abbas, some of these things, they used to have meetings with our Imams and trying to organize a rebellion, saying that we'll give the Imamat to you. Imam refused to join them. Why? Because he knew that these people are raising the flag but inviting people to themselves. So,
not for Islam, basically.
And because Zayd al-Shahid also had his uprising at that time, he was also accused of the same thing. That look, amongst the Shia, this thing started coming that Zayd, why did he rise without the permission of the Imam? He was kind of inviting people to himself. Then you even had this phenomenon whereby some people became Zaydiyah. They started saying that the Imam has to do khuruj, or has to take sword and fight, otherwise is not the Imam. So all this is happening. Imam is defending Zayd, saying, says, إنما دعاكم إلى الرضا من آل محمد صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ولو ظهر لوفى بما دعاكم. If he would become victorious, he would fulfill that promise that I'm rising for the Ridha of Ali Muhammad, for to please the Ali Muhammad, to give them their right.
So I guess those riwayat that are warning Zayd from doing qiyam, because we also have those kind of riwayat, right? That Imam is discouraging Zayd.
Yeah.
It's more in the sense that it's not going to be fruitful.
Exactly.
You're going to die in the end. So sort of telling him that, look, if you're going to go out and fight, you're going to die. So it's not going to bear any fruits. Not saying that you're wrong and this is a batil qiyam.
Yeah, and that this step he took was taghut. Something is doing taghut.
Yeah,
so that's one example.
That's not what the Imam is saying.
So this is one example about a qiyam at the time of the Imams themselves. Then we have other narrations that talk about, for example, the qiyam of Yamani. Okay, so this brings us to the signs of zuhur and that thing. So, for example, we have a narration that says that لَيْسَ فِي الرَّأْيَاتِ رَأْيَةُ أَحْدَى مِنْ رَأْيَةِ الْيَمَانِ. So this again is the word of ra'ya, means the flag. So he's saying amongst these different flags that would be raised near the zuhur of Al-Mahdi, there's no flag more guided than the flag of Yamani. Okay. So we don't want to go into the details of who the Yamani is and the science of zuhur. That is a separate discussion. The point I'm trying to make is that on one side you have narrations that say كُلُّ رَأْيَةٍ تُرْفَأَ قَبْلَ قِيَامِ الْمَهْدِي فَهُوَ طَاغُوتٌ. Keep this in mind. On the other side, Imams are approving of some uprisings in their own times. Zayd, for example, probably the uprising of Mukhtar, probably they even said the Tawabin was not Taghut, at least. Maybe they would have advised them against it. But there's a difference between advising someone to not do an uprising and saying that he was a Taghut. He was worshipping other than Allah. That's a very big thing to say. So these approvals, with the approval of the flag of Yamani, tell us that this thing which is being said here, kullu ra'yatin, is referring to a specific type of uprising. So now the question comes, why was this said? So there are 3-4 explanations to this, and the ulama, those different scholars have different explanations. So a group of scholars have said that those narrations which say that all the flags are batil, they were said out of taqiyya. That's one explanation. Second explanation given is based on this narration. It says that when Imam approved of Zayd, he said that his uprising is approved. Why? Because he was not inviting people to himself. This becomes an evidence to say that those narrations are trying to tell that those uprisings that happened with wrong intentions, people had worldly power in mind, those are batil, and it makes even sense, right, that person would be taghut. Someone who's Banu Abbas were taghut, without any doubt. Why? Because they misused the name of the Imam, they raised a flag, fooled people to support them, and then when the time came to do the right thing, they said, we are the Ahlul Bayt. We have a relationship with the Prophet. So definitely they are
killing
taghut.
many of our Imams as well.
Killing the Imam, killing many of the Shias. So they are definitely taghut. So even this, so some of the scholars have done this. This word taghut is saying that because it has such high negative connotation, and we also have so many narrations that approve of certain type of qiyams, definitely it means a specific, those things which are being described as batil, and no one should support such people, are the ones where people are rising for wrong intentions. So yeah, it's a very important practical lesson for us today. We should be careful that who we are joining. So we might see people who are raising the flag that we are defending Tashayyu, we are defending the Shia, we are there for the zuhur of Imam Zaman. We need to be careful. We need to see that who these people are, what are their intentions, what's their background. We see, are they inviting people to themselves? Do they have worldly benefits? We need to be careful. So, and it was the right time for the Imams to explain this, because people would otherwise go after, because it's even difficult to imagine the situation that time. It was after the Qiyam of Imam al-Hussein and his martyrdom, there was a series. It lit a fire in Muslim Ummah that continuously there were Qiyams, small and big. So imagine people are ready to go and fight and do Qiyam, and there are these false people. The bottom line is that when you have conflicting narrations, you need to put everything together, the historical context, what those other narrations are saying, the specific words used in this narration, and put all of that together.
And again, with all the reasoning, so it's not just these two sets of riwayat. We have many other riwayat that directly may not be referring to this, but they give us a context, give us a bigger understanding of what Islam expects from us. And your whole session was that basically I brought this up just because it's a question, but otherwise, the whole session showed how logical and it is, and how Islamic it is that we have a social duty to prepare for the coming of the Imam. I mean, it's 2 plus 2, but these ahadith sort of bring that doubt, so they need to be solved. But when you put the ahadith together, it has to be within the Islamic holistic Islamic understanding and the intellect and so on.
And the point you mentioned is very important, because this is exactly what some of the scholars have done. That look, they say that we have the obligation of Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. We have the obligation of jihad if the enemy attacks. We have the obligation of preparing for the Imam. So all these obligations are there on one side, and we need to look at the complete picture. Yes, if we have these narrations, they need to be explained. So those things cannot be put aside. So I'll just even quote Sayyid al-Khui, although the topic he's discussing is jihad in ghaiba. So it's not very directly related to our topic. But this same question is there, that in ghaiba, is this duty of, for example, jihad and defending, for example, your land if someone attacks you, does it still hold? So he says that وَقَدْ تَحَصَّلَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ أَنَّ ظَاهِرْ عَدَمَ سُقُوطِ وُجُوبِ الْجِهَادِ فِي أَصْلِ الْغَيْبَةِ وَثُبُوتُهُ فِي كَافَّةِ الْآثَارِ لَدَى تَوَفُّرِ شَرَائِطِ. He's saying that, look, there are some of these big, important Islamic duties that just because we are in ghaiba, they cannot be left behind. And then he even adds that
one of them is jihad, basically.
One of them is jihad, then one of them he says is Amr bil Ma'ruf and Nahy anil Munkar. And if you want to even see preparing for the return of the Imam, it also comes under the duty of Amr bil Ma'ruf, because there's no greater Ma'ruf than presence of the Imam and his being able to give out that guidance. And there's not a greater munkar than the oppressors just having a free reign and just doing what they are doing today.
Ahsantum, thank you very much, Shaykhna. Very beautiful explanation, very interesting discussion as well. A lot of content and spent quite a long time as well. But alhamdulillah, it's very beneficial. So this gives us a good idea about what it means to be active in our intizar, in our waiting for the Imam. So inshallah, we'll continue the more discussions on the topic of how to bring this whole concept of Imam and Mahdawiyah in today's world and how it's relevant for us, inshallah. So we'll continue the course, and there's a few sessions left and a few days left until the Wilada of Mahdi, inshallah. So we'll see you again in the next session. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.